It wasn't getting lost that scared me. It was realizing the rain was washing away every sign that I'd ever been there. I think about that weekend every time I hear heavy rain on my roof, because I still don't know whether the man I met was trying to save me or making sure nobody else could. It happened in northern Washington during a weekend camping trip I'd planned for months. The forecast called for light showers overnight, but sometime after lunch the sky turned almost black. Within minutes, the trail became a stream. Water rushed down the hillside, filling footprints almost as soon as they appeared. I decided to head back early before things got worse. About half an hour later, I reached a section of trail I didn't recognize. At first I blamed myself. Every tree looked the same in the rain, and the fog made it impossible to see more than 30 yards ahead. I checked my GPS. It had no signal. My paper map was soaked badly enough that the ink had started bleeding. I kept walking, convinced I'd eventually recognize something. Instead, I found an old picnic table sitting alone beside the trail. It looked abandoned. One bench had collapsed and moss covered most of the wood. Sitting in the middle of the table was a steaming metal coffee mug. I stopped immediately. Someone had been there only moments earlier. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Just rain pounding against the leaves. I waited another minute before walking away. About 20 minutes later, I heard someone whistling behind me. It wasn't a tune, just 3 short notes repeated every few minutes. I never saw who was making them. Eventually, the trail opened onto an old logging road where I spotted a man wearing a dark rain jacket standing beside a silver SUV. He looked to be around 50 and greeted me with a friendly smile. "You look soaked," he said. I admitted I was trying to find the trailhead. He pointed down the road. "You're heading the wrong way. It'll be dark before you get there." He offered me a bottle of water and unfolded a map on the hood of his SUV. Everything about him felt normal. He even laughed about getting lost himself years earlier. Before I left, he asked, almost casually, "Anybody expecting you back tonight?" I told him my wife knew where I was hiking. He nodded once. "Good. Smart." Then he packed up his map and wished me luck. I walked in the direction he'd pointed, but after another hour, I realized I hadn't seen a single trail marker. The rain was even heavier now. I turned around, hoping to find the logging road again, but I couldn't. That's when I heard an engine somewhere in the distance. Relief washed over me until I realized the sound wasn't moving. It stayed in one place, idling for several minutes before shutting off. By then, it was nearly dark. I finally stumbled across a small emergency shelter maintained by the Park Service. The door was unlocked. Inside were 2 bunks, a table, and an emergency radio that had been damaged by water years earlier. Someone had recently lit a fire in the stove because the ashes were still warm. I hadn't seen another person since the man with the SUV. Around midnight, headlights swept across the small window. A vehicle had stopped outside. I stayed perfectly still. Someone knocked once, not loudly, just enough to let me know they were there. "You okay in there?" a man's voice called. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I didn't answer. After a long silence, I heard footsteps walking away, followed by an engine starting again. I waited until sunrise before opening the door. Tire tracks covered the mud outside the shelter, but the rain had blurred them so badly they could have belonged to almost any vehicle. Less than an hour later, I reached the main access road and was picked up by a park ranger. When I mentioned the silver SUV, he frowned. "Silver SUV?" he asked. "There aren't any public roads anywhere near that section of the forest." I assumed he meant I was confused after hiking in bad weather. Maybe I was. Fear and exhaustion can do strange things to memory, but one detail still bothers me. When I finally got home, I emptied my backpack to dry everything out. Inside one of the side pockets was the same stainless steel coffee mug I'd seen sitting alone on that abandoned picnic table. It wasn't mine. I have no idea how it got there, and after all these years, I still haven't been able to convince myself that I accidentally packed it. The rain started so quietly that I almost didn't notice it. One minute I could hear birds somewhere above the trees, and the next there was nothing except water dripping through the branches. Looking back, that's the moment I should have turned around. I still think about that afternoon more than any other day of my life, not because I got lost, but because I became convinced someone else was making sure I stayed that way. It happened during a solo hike through a state forest in Oregon a few years ago. The trail was popular enough that I passed several people during the first hour, but after the rain picked up, everyone seemed to disappear. The forest changed completely. The trees blocked most of the daylight, fog settled between the trunks, and the sound of the rain drowned out everything else. My phone had no signal, which wasn't unusual, and I wasn't worried. I knew the trail looped back toward the parking lot. I just had to keep walking. About an hour later, I reached a narrow wooden bridge crossing a creek. Standing in the middle of the bridge was a bright yellow raincoat hanging over the railing. No backpack, no boots underneath it, just a raincoat swaying gently in the wind. I called out, thinking someone might have dropped it by accident. No answer. I looked over the railing into the creek, expecting to see someone fishing or collecting gear, but there was nobody there. I left it alone and continued hiking. Less than 15 minutes later, I saw the same raincoat again. This time it was hanging from a low branch beside the trail. I stopped walking immediately. I knew it had to be a different one. There was no possible way I had walked in a circle that quickly. I tried convincing myself someone had picked it up from the bridge and carried it ahead of me, but I hadn't passed anyone. The rain was falling harder now, making it difficult to see more than 50 yards through the trees. I kept moving, telling myself I was letting my imagination get ahead of me. Eventually, the trail widened into an old gravel road. Fresh tire tracks cut through the mud, even though I hadn't seen a vehicle all day. As I followed them, I noticed another set of tracks beside them. Boot prints. They appeared for a few yards, disappeared into the trees, then came back onto the road farther ahead. It looked like someone kept stepping off the road every time they heard something coming. I told myself it was probably a hunter avoiding puddles, but hunting season hadn't started yet. I checked my map. According to it, I should have reached the parking lot nearly 30 minutes earlier. That's when I realized I hadn't seen a trail marker in almost an hour. Before I could decide what to do, I heard an engine somewhere behind me. I turned around expecting to see a ranger truck. Instead, a faded green pickup rolled slowly through the rain. It stopped about 30 feet away. The driver rolled down his window just enough to speak. "Need a ride?" he asked. He was probably in his 60s with gray hair and a friendly smile. Nothing about him immediately seemed threatening. "I think I'm on the wrong trail," I admitted. He nodded toward the passenger seat. "Hop in. I'll take you back to the main entrance." I thanked him, but said I preferred to walk. He didn't argue. He simply smiled again and said, "Suit yourself. Just don't head farther east. The bridge washed out this morning." Then he drove away. I stood there for a moment wondering how he knew which direction I planned to go. I hadn't said anything. I looked at my map again. There wasn't even a bridge marked to the east. I kept following the road until it split in two. One branch looked freshly driven on. The other was almost completely overgrown. I chose the overgrown one because it matched the direction my map suggested. 10 minutes later, I heard the truck again. This time it came from somewhere ahead of me. That shouldn't have been possible. I never saw it pass. The engine idled for several seconds before shutting off. I couldn't see the vehicle through the trees, but I knew it was close. I stepped off the road and waited. Rainwater soaked through my jacket while I listened. A car door closed. Then silence. No footsteps, no voices. Just rain. I stayed hidden for almost 20 minutes before carefully moving through the woods instead of returning to the road. Every few minutes I thought I caught movement between the trees, but whenever I stopped, everything became still again. Eventually, I reached another gravel road. The same green pickup was parked beside it, empty. The driver's door was open. The engine was cold enough that rain no longer steamed from the hood. I backed away without making a sound. Then I heard someone whistle behind me. Not loudly, just once. Close enough that I instinctively turned around. There was nobody there. When I looked back toward the truck, the driver's door was closed. I still can't explain that. Maybe I'd remembered it wrong. Maybe the wind pushed it shut. I wasn't interested in finding out. I walked downhill until I reached a creek and followed it for what felt like hours. Just before dark, I found a paved maintenance road and flagged down a utility truck. The driver let me sit inside while we waited for deputies. I told them about the green pickup and the man who'd offered me a ride. They searched the roads before nightfall, but didn't find anyone. One deputy looked at my map and quietly pointed to the place where I'd first met the driver. "That's strange," he said. "There hasn't been a drivable road there in almost 15 years. I assumed he meant I was mistaken about the location. After hiking for hours in heavy rain, that seemed like the most reasonable explanation. Even now, I think that's probably what happened. But every time it rains hard enough to drown out the sounds around me, I remember standing alone on that gravel road, watching a truck disappear into a forest where, according to the maps, no road should have existed at all.